Today's session is Student Success Tips by Mr. Andrew Silva, Transition Specialist from the Center of Student with Disabilities. This session will be recorded so that you may come back to it later if you need, and so others who may have missed out on today's events will be able to come and watch it. Thank you. So now, at this time, please mute your mics for the best sound experience. Otherwise, the feedback could interfere with information we will be sharing today. Without further ado, here's Mr. Silva.
Thank you for that. And I'd like to thank TV for giving me the opportunity. My name is Andrew Silva, and I work for the Center for Students with Disabilities. This presentation, it's always a privilege to give. Usually it's something that I will present for our new project hire students in the department. And I'm able to share this with all of you here today. As you can see, I have my mask on because I'm on campus right now. So I do apologize if there's any noise or ringing of phones that you can hear in the background. But welcome everyone. So before we start, I just kind of briefly, a few slides, I'd like to go over my department for the Center for Students with Disabilities. So you probably hear CSD or Center for Students with Disabilities. It's the same. The Center for Students with Disabilities, CSD, provides students regardless of disability, if otherwise qualified, and equal opportunity to complete their educational goal through the provision of accommodations based upon their individual disability. A person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities. So it's very important to remember if there are any students out there, if they have a disability and they're seeking accommodations, our department can help you. Also, it can be even a condition. Maybe there's a medical condition or just something like pregnancy where maybe it's causing impairments for you to miss class. Maybe you broke your hand and it's hard for you to write notes, take exams. Please still see us because we can provide accommodations for you. So I mentioned major life activities earlier, and these are the examples of major life activities. If you have any problems with these, that can be a sign that maybe some type of an accommodation that we can provide would benefit you while here at EPCC, whether it's eating, walking, seeing, thinking, lifting, communicating, bending. There's more. These are just some of the major life activities, and if you feel that any students out there, if this affects you during your time at EPCC, please see our department if you'd be interested in some accommodations. And these are some of the accommodations. I always say some because accommodations, there's so many. We can't narrow them down into some finite space because everyone's disability, it does affect them differently. So the most common though, of course, is the academic advising, our CSD counselors that provide the accommodations. It's a one-stop shop here. You can register for classes, you can get degree evaluations here. We do also provide note takers. A note taker is someone that goes to class with you and will offer their perspective in the class. If needed, we have sign language interpreters. And by the way, our sign language interpreters, they don't go only to classes with you, but anywhere on campus. So if you need to go to financial aid, if you need to go to admissions, our sign language interpreters will be there. If you're in an EPCC club, like any sports, they will be there as well. We also do provide tutoring. I know we're the only disability service office from the institutions in this area that do provide that because tutoring is not an accommodation, it's a service. We also provide testing accommodations. If a student needs extra time on exams, if they need to take an exam where it's distraction free, we can provide that. We also offer Scribes, where someone is sent in to write word for word what you tell them to write down. And we have plenty of assistive technology. And the way that I summarize assistive technology is if you struggle with reading, if you struggle with seeing or hearing, that could be a clear indication that some form of assistive technology can help benefit your needs while you're here at EPCC. And these are the steps. How to enroll in CSD. It's a three-step process. The first step, all students, they have to self-identify as having a disability and seeking accommodations. That's step one. Step two is we do have an intake form. You have to fill that out, and you can get that intake form in person Or if you prefer sending us an email, we can email it back to you, and you could bring it back the same way, either in person or via email. And the third step, you schedule a meeting with the CSD counselor and bring the supporting documentation of your disability. Now, if you do not have documentation of your disability, you can still see us. I don't want that to kind of be what holds students from seeing us, but it's encouraged. It's easier if you do have that documentation. So those are the 3 steps on how to register with our department, the Center for Students with Disabilities. Now we can begin the presentation. So this is what everyone's here for. They want to know, well, how can I be successful while here at EPCC? And the title is a little misleading because it says Student Success Tips. But those tips, they apply to everyone here, all of us at our workplace. For you students, it's going to apply while you're here at EPCC, and maybe some of you might have a current job right now that you can apply this to, or a future job. So it's very important. How do we define success? Everyone has their own definition of success. My definition would be different than your definition. Maybe my definition of success would be well, having a good job and being able to have healthy relationships. Someone else's definition of success, maybe a student, would be, well, I'm taking a biology class. I want to make sure I get an A because I want to get into the nursing program. Or maybe someone that's in a automotive class, they're interested in learning and getting a job immediately. So all of our definitions of success, they are going to be different. But what I noticed though when doing this presentation is, well, when it comes to failure, there seems to be a lot of overlap with consistency on how we can define failure, which is the negation of success. Well, what is failure? Well, we can say, like I said, the negation, well, it's not succeeding. And how do we fail? It's very important that we ask ourselves, if we're doing something and we don't succeed, how did we fail? Where did we fall short? What was it that led us to this outcome? And there can be several things. It maybe we ignored what you're gonna see in future slides, what I'm gonna go over with goal setting. Maybe we didn't set any goals. Maybe we didn't manage our time properly. There can be many reasons on why we failed, but this is also the important part. It's very important to remember, because a lot of times people look at failure and success and they think that they're mutually exclusive. They mean that they're not the same. There's no relationship, but there kind of is, because sometimes failure is important. We might do something one time and we might not get that desired result, but that's okay. If we learn from that, that's the key thing. If we learn from our failures, we can change the outcome. So failure is important. If we just take a class and let's say we fail it and we don't analyze why we failed it, and we go and take the class again and we don't change anything about it, then yeah, we need to make sure that we realize, hey, I failed before. How am I going to pass for this semester? It's very important. So these are the paths for success, which we will cover. We're going to go over goals. We're going to go over time management, availability, communication, and plan of action. Plan of action, I changed that because it actually had a very technical term called Post-Mortem Documentation, which I'm going to get into, but it's the same as having some plan of action. And it's very important that maybe even this semester, I know this is a lot. You don't have to focus on doing all of them at once. If you just kind of gradually work your way to it and just say, hey, you know what, this semester, I'm going to work on goal setting or time management. The next semester, I'm going to work on 2 of these and 3. Eventually build your way up. It can be very intimidating when you just see a large amount of things that you feel you have to do, like what I'm listing here, and say, hey, that's great information, but it seems kind of hard to just apply it all at once. So for everyone out there that's listening, what I would take away is to kind of focus on one first, and then work your way to all of these in order to make sure and ensure that you do have success. So goals, we hear about them all the time. it's February as of this recording, so last month or maybe a little before, people probably had a lot of New Year's resolutions, and you know, it's natural. We like goals. We talk about goals. There might be some um, kind of a thought process that goes in where we want to better ourselves. That's natural. So goals are a desired, attainable future result achieved by a person or group of people. Now, it's very important to understand there are two types of goals. You have your short-term goals, which are achievable in 12 months or less, and you have your long-term goals, which are achievable in a year or more. So it's very important when you're making these goals that you understand these two differences. For instance, if I'm going to take an exam in a week and I want to make sure that I get an A on that exam, we know that's, well, it's less than 12 months, so that's a short-term goal. So I have to approach it accordingly. Um, Whereas maybe if it's a week from now, that means, hey, you know what? I have to start studying and planning on how I'm going to guarantee getting that good grade. Whereas a long-term goal, you don't have to approach it so aggressively. You can pace yourself because it's going to be something that's achievable in a year or more. For instance, maybe it's your first year at EPCC and your goal is to graduate. That's a long-term goal. So you don't have to say, okay, I have to study 5 to 10 hours a day. I have to make sure. No, you don't have to put all that stress. That's what's great about setting these goals. It can help eliminate some of that bad stress with something else that I'm going to talk about later on called time management. So what I always do with students is when given the opportunity, I'd like them to take some time and write down their goals and write down their short and long-term goals and talk about them, which we're going to go over here in this slide. So starting now, it's very important. Yes, starting now, if you haven't already, set your short and long-term goals for success at EPCC. Write them down. It's very important to have that visual aid. It's like you're going to hold yourself accountable by writing it down. If you write it down on a sheet of paper or maybe even an email and you save it, it's something that you look at. What I used to do before the internet was big was maybe write it down, put it on my refrigerator somewhere where I would see every day, so I know, okay, this is what I'm working towards. So it's very important to not only just say them or share them, but yeah, believe in them and really say what it is that you want to write down for your goals. And how are you going to achieve them? That's very important. A lot of people, they say, okay, I want to get an A in this class. Well, it's very important to have these discussions. How are you going to achieve that? What are you going to do? How much time are you going to dedicate to this class? Are you going to just do the homework? Does that count as studying for you? Or are you going to go above and beyond to make sure that you do get that? Are you going to meet with the instructor? Are you going to make sure you check your emails twice a day? Those are the conversations that you have to have. When you reach your goals, make new ones. I know a lot of people, they'll tell everyone about their goals, but once they reach them, what happens? It's very important to make new ones. And they don't always have to seem like they're better than the previous goal. For instance, if you said, hey, I want to make sure I get an A in the class, well, my next goal, I'm going to get an A in the other class. Maybe your goal would be like, well, I did have problems registering, so after I got that A, I'm gonna make a goal where I go to registration, I go to early registration, so that way I can get those classes that I really want. So it's very important to constantly make new ones. Make both your short and your long-term goals. Also, this is equally important. You need to follow up on your goals and check your progress. And you need to make sure that when you're making these goals, that they're attainable. That's why it's very important to go back and check on your progress. For instance, let's say, for instance, you're in a math class and you've taken almost all your exams and you're failing. You have a 60. Is it still practical with only one more exam left that you're going to get an A? Probably not. It might be depending on how they're weighted, but probably it's not going to be attainable. So it's very important from time to time, frequently, maybe it might be once a week, check your progress. One thing that I do is I do a lot of like running, marathon running. I do a lot of half marathons. So from time to time, I write down every week how much mileage I've ran. and I check on my progress. I'll check and make sure, how am I feeling? Am I feeling healthy? What are my times? How am I doing? It's very important to always follow up on your progress. This is probably the most important skill out of all of these that I'm going to mention today for success: time management. Now, when it comes to time management, I've noticed I have the opportunity, especially if I'm eating downstairs, I usually will ask students when I see them, well, how often do you study, or do you have a schedule? And 9 times out of 10, most of them, there's no schedule or there's no set time. So remember, it's very important, this skill, to master it, because it's going to carry on when you're from here at EPCC into your workplace to make sure that you're very productive. So time management is the ability to effectively use one's time. It's the planning use of time. So you get to plan out your day. Now, with technology, we have a lot of ways that we can plan our days out. I know here there's a picture of a calendar. I know a lot of people that still fill out physically their calendar for their tasks, but what I do is I use my calendar on Outlook, and that helps a lot. I'll be able to show when I have my meetings, when I have presentations, certain tasks, I can do that. It's very efficient. And the good thing about time management is you gain control of your day. It is no longer your day or those tasks that are weighing down heavily on you that determine your day. It's you. You're the one that's in charge because you're planning ahead. So good time management allows you to accomplish more in a shorter period of time. Just a tip, what I do before every week, every work week, Sunday night or even Saturday, what I do is I look at my calendar and I see all my tasks, what I need to do. So you as students, what you can do, maybe if it's on a Sunday or a Saturday, is plan ahead. Look at your syllabus and map out what assignments you have due, if you have a test coming up, and how are you going to approach it. If you have a test on Friday, do you want to just study Thursday? Probably not, right? That's considered cramming. You want to spread out the hours that you study equally throughout the day. You want to be consistent. That's the most important part. So what I do here is I always reflect with students, and I talk to them and I say, well, let's reflect on your study habits. How often do you study for your math class? How often do you study for your history class? And then I tell the students, well, if you want to create a studying schedule, this is a perfect opportunity. So remember, if you want to create a schedule for your study time, that's going to be very beneficial to you in the long term, because what you're doing by creating that schedule for your study time is you're consistently setting hours to study, versus a lot of students, they'll cram and they'll wait till the very end, and all that stress, it's not worth it to put all that stress the night before, the day of, and maybe a few days after until you find out what your grade is. So continuing with time management, it's very important to create a schedule. Now, sometimes I do work with students who have autism, so when they're great at a schedule, but sometimes if we have a change in plans, that can cause a disruption. So it's also important to understand that we need to create an ability to adapt. If you create a study schedule where you're studying Monday at 5 o'clock for your math class, but for some reason, maybe there's a circumstance that came up and you're not available to study for that, you have to be able to adapt, but still commit yourself to that extra hour of studying. You can use Excel or Daily Planner or the calendar we have on Outlook to create a schedule for you. And what I do is with our tutoring here, I always tell students when they get tutoring with us, work with your tutor. Make sure that you and your tutor are devising a way so that way you have your syllabus and it's mapped out and onto a schedule. Now, for those of you that might not have a tutor, you can do that with yourselves, or maybe if you have a study partner or a study group, which is, I always encourage students. One thing that you should do is find a study group, because in that study group, chances are you're going to have other individuals, and depending on how far you are in your college career, they're going to have the same major, they're going to have the same degree plan as you. So those are the people that you want to work with and create this study group. And it's very important to note down those deadlines, whether it's a project, whether it's a test, whether it's the last day to drop, whether it's early registration. Always write down those deadlines and build great study habits. That's the most important. Now, it's very important when you are studying, try to be as distraction free as possible. I know that everyone, we have cell phones and we're very dependent on them. What I always tell students is, you know what, stay away from electronics, unless if you need that kind of static white noise to help concentrate. But other than that, try to stay away from cell phones. Also, though, it's very important because I have worked with students where when I'm talking to them, they'll mention that yeah, they study 5 hours straight for a certain subject, and we have to also be mindful that, you know, we might get mentally fatigued. So right at that 3 hour mark, or even if maybe it might be an hour and a half, take a break. It's very important, and then go back to it. But you shouldn't put yourself in a situation where you feel that you have to study nonstop for 5 hours. Because remember, the semesters are long. So if you're doing that on a daily basis, you're going to get burnt out. So it's very important to also monitor the number of hours that you are studying. So these are the benefits of time management. Now, I know I mentioned earlier about, well, you get control of your day. Well, with time management, you're not going to miss deadlines. That important assignment that you had that was due on Blackboard, you're going to make sure that you turn that in. You get to sleep well because there's no all-nighters. Cramming is very bad. When you're cramming, you're not learning the material. You're just kind of briefly memorizing it, and it's going to stay in your short-term memory. And that's not learning, because when you and I've happened in from experience. I have my degree in mathematics, and I knew a lot of students who would cram. They would cram all the time, and they got through Cal 1. They would cram in Cal 3, they got through it. They would cram in differentials, they got through it. But when we went to the advanced mathematics, like complex real analysis, you couldn't cram. You had to know all of that. And by cramming, it creates holes in your knowledge. So if you're progressing in a field, you're going to have more holes, and eventually you're going to get stuck at some class and not be able to pass. So it's very important to make sure that you don't cram, pull in all-nighters. And by mastering time management, you'll be able to sleep well. And like I said earlier, you're going to have a lot less of that bad stress. There's two types of stress. There's like the bad stress, and then there's eustress, which is good. Stress can be beneficial, but the bad stress, you'll have less of it. You'll also be able to become independent. A lot of people here, they might be young adults. So by mastering this skill, it'll show that, you know what, you're going to be more independent down the road. And like I said, these skills, they do carry over. They carry over not only while you're here at EPCC, but when you're into the workplace, when you're working, when you have your career, when you have your dream job. So the next thing that I want to talk about is availability. Well, availability, you have to ask yourself, what are your priorities? I always, I'll talk to students, or even when I'm with high school students, I'll ask them, what are your priorities right now? And I like to hear when students say that, well, being a student, being a student, especially at the high school level, that should be your priority. Now, here at EPCC, you know, some of us, we might have families. Some of us might have jobs. Some of us might have a combination of those on top of school. So it's very important to write down our priorities. If we know what our priorities are, that's where we should be delegating our time to. For instance, video games. If is video game a priority of mine? No. Work is. Should I be giving video games or movies the attention of maybe like 10 hours a day on the weekends? You know, yeah, that can be very conflicting, and it can be very problematic. So it's very important for us to realize, what are our priorities? How are you using your free time? We all, some way or another, end up with some form of free time. How are we using it? If we're a student, we can ask ourselves, well, with that extra 2 hours that I have Saturday, am I going to be studying, or am I just going to be scrolling through my phone? Now, that's when you have to realize that, yeah, this is important for school and employment, because your availability, that allows you, if you have a great availability, you're going to be able to take probably more classes, and in turn, what that means is you're going to be able to graduate faster. That's how it will work for some people. Now, when I go, and I'm talking about employment now, availability is very important. Now, there can be a scenario where they ask, how do you feel about working weekends or nights? And let's say, for instance, it's a retail job, and the person says, you know what, I don't do weekends, I don't do night, I don't do anything after 4 p.m. Is that person going to be likely to get the job? Probably not. So the availability that we all have, it does help us both at school and later on in employment. Communication is also very important. This importance, it's been amplified during this pandemic. I know before, when everyone was on campus, you could just walk over to a department or somewhere if you needed to see someone or find out information. Now, a lot of this communication has resorted through web-based seminars or emails. So it's very important to have those great communication skills. Familiarize yourself with the student email system. Yes, that's something that in our department, I do train all of the new students to make sure they understand Outlook, they understand OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive, and basically they get real familiar with Blackboard as well. It's very important to familiarize yourself with our email accounts. Check your email a few times a day. It's because, especially now, with the cold front, if you didn't check your emails or you weren't part of the Tejano alert, some students might have showed up before 10 o'clock. And be patient with those responses. Allow about 1 to 2 business days. So it's also a responsibility, if an instructor sends the student an email, please, yes, respond to the email. Responding to the email shows that you did get the email. So it's very important to not just open it, but yeah, respond. That lets the instructor know, or the person that was sending it, that you did receive the email. It's also very important to save your contact information for instructors, for tutors, for counselors, so that way, whenever you need to, you can reach out to them. So more on communication, students are encouraged to ask questions. If you're in class and if there's something that you don't understand, it's very important that you ask questions. I've been in so many classes where when I was a student, I know no one knew what the instructor was talking about. We were lost or confused, but no one said anything because we were embarrassed. And like you probably heard people say, there's no such thing as a bad question. So make sure you do speak out when you're in class, in lecture. If you can't, make sure you send an email. Also, make sure ask questions when you're in tutoring. For all those students, I hope students are going to get tutoring. Ask questions. If some tutor shows you an example of a problem, they work out a problem, and there's a certain step that you don't understand, ask. That's what their job is, to help you. If there's anything that you need help troubleshooting, whether it's technology, make sure you communicate that. A lot of students, they might be intimidated by Blackboard or certain technologies, and they're kind of afraid to ask because they feel that maybe they should know that. It's always a great time to ask, especially if it's going to interfere with your grades while attending EPCC. So what I tell students, though, is when they go to tutoring here, tutoring is not where the tutor does all the talking. That's never how our department has tutoring. So what we do is we ask questions. We make sure that the student understands. Sometimes we make the student come up with problems and see how they can handle certain problems. So it's very important when it comes to communication. There's sending and receiving, right? That the communication going both ways has to be strong, but when it comes to sending and receiving information. And it's very important to participate in class discussions. So we also have a plan of action. Now, the plan of action, like I said earlier, it has a very technical term. It's called Post-Mortem Documentation. A lot of consultants use this method. A lot of engineering firms also use this method as well. And I think that it would be best used for students to also use. And just excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water real quick. Okay, so anytime after a key event, meet with your instructor, tutor, or classmates. So if there's a, and this is how I classify a key event. If there's a test, if there's an end of semester, at the end of the semester, at the end of a project, something big, meet with hopefully a tutor, an instructor, classmates, or someone that knows you, someone that is familiar with you. And this is very important. Discuss the following. So let me just give you kind of a little bit of info. We're having a student and parent college day for the Center for Students with Disabilities, where we're inviting all students that are in high school right now, their parents as well, to visit our department and learn about our services. This is a big event. And after this event, we're going to have a meeting with the staff, and this is what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss, well, what went well. So if you took a test, well, what went well on the test? Well, maybe it's the grade. Maybe you got the grade that you wanted. Maybe you got that A on that exam. So you can talk about that. Or maybe there was a very challenging question that you knew ahead of time that the instructor said, hey, this is going to be on it, and you did a great job. Also, this is also very important. You have to discuss what could you have done better. It's very important to be critical of yourself. So maybe you realize, you know what, maybe I didn't do so well. Maybe I got a bad grade, or maybe even though you got a good grade, you realize, hey, you know what, maybe I should spend more time. I only spent 2 hours a week studying for this class, and I know that it's going to get harder, and I know I should be devoting more time. So you have to be very critical of yourself on your performance, where you understand that there's some things that always need improvement. No one is perfect. We all make mistakes. There's always room for improvement. And the last one, how will you improve for the next time? That's probably the most important, because right then and there, you're planning for that next exam. You're planning for that next class. You're planning for the next semester. And you're gonna work on ways on how you approach them differently, so that way you can guarantee your success. Those are the three components for a plan of action, which, as I said earlier, it's part of a post-mortem documentation. You're basically doing an evaluation on yourselves. And this, like I said, it's very important when you're in school, and you're going to find it equally important when you're when you're in the workplace, when you have an event or a project. You're going to see, and when you run these type of meetings, you're going to have a lot more better outcomes than what you probably were initially expecting. So here's my contact information. I do have my phone number here. It's 831-2426. That's the CSD main office. I do also have my personal email and also the CSD email. My office phone number is 831-2736. Now, before we kind of go into a Q&A, one thing that's also very important when it comes to, let me go here through time management. Now, this is also very important. I hope a lot of students that are here, whether they're here in person or watching this virtually, it's very important to remember that, and I can't talk about it enough, get a study group. Form a study group of individuals that you know are probably in your same degree pathway, so that way you guys will move on from one class to the next. Now, whether you're in a study group, or for all those students that might be doing projects, what happens is when you have this involvement where it's a group of students together, my biggest problem in college was when we would have these study groups, the first hour was it felt like people were goofing off. It felt like we were waiting for someone to get there, or people were finding excuses on to do other things and get distracted. So this is my advice to you all. Anytime there's some meeting of people, and whether it's school related or in the workplace, there should always be an agenda. Write down an agenda on the task that you need to do for that meeting. Whether if you're doing math problems, you need to do all of chapter 2, or maybe it's biology and you need to read all of I'm trying to think, the respiratory system. You need to read all about the respiratory system. Plan out all your tasks, the agenda. If it's a group project, assign roles. Make sure you write down what everyone does understand. And that's probably the most important thing that keeps people on the right task, setting that agenda. Now, talking about agendas in terms of the workplace, it's very important when you do have meetings at your workplace that you do create agendas. Agendas keep people on topic. They keep everything in a scheduled manner, and distribute the agendas ahead of time. What's the point of creating an agenda if people are seeing it for the first time that day when the meeting's happening? That's pointless. It's going to be a very ineffective meeting. So what I always do when I have meetings, I always create an agenda and I send it at least a few days in advance to a week. So that way individuals, they're able to look over it and process their thoughts and plan for it to be a very effective meeting. So that actually concludes my presentation. I know we are a little early. I see here in the chat, it says here, so set goals for your studying group. Yes, always, that's a good point, Patricia. Always set goals for a study group. If the goal is to do a certain problem set and you want to break them up evenly, do that. But you should always have a goal, an objective for that study group, a purpose. And creating an agenda for that could definitely help. Now, I believe there's still more time. So anyone here in the audience, does anyone have any questions? Any questions or comments?
Any question for Mr. Silva? Great advice, Danny says. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there is no further questions, you can still interrupt me if you do have one by raising your hand or putting it into the chat. I would like to take a moment to thank Mr. Silva on behalf of Tejano Virtual Events for his wonderful presentation today. Thank you, Mr. Silva.
Thank you all. And I hope everyone has a great weekend.
You too, especially nice and snowy. Thank you, Ms. DeWitt and our audience for coming today. We appreciate you greatly. While I still have you here, I would like to share some information with you. Thank you, Ula. Ula says it was a great presentation as well. So if you have not already from our guides, I would like to introduce to you the online assistance guide. It includes many services around our college, including the services brought to us by Mr. Silva from the Center of Students with Disabilities. It has a link from each one of their office, from VV to Northwest to Trans Mountain, MDP, all the way to RG. So if you haven't had a chance to download that online assistance PDF, we highly recommend it. It has the times that services are open, as well as the links to connect to them online. So please take advantage of that. And I'd also like to share with you that our online tutoring room from the Office of Student Success is open from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. So if you need assistance there, it is in the chat as well. And then I would also like to share with you, for those of you who's keeping track, Tejano passports. So if you're not familiar with Tejano passports, you are going to, give me just a second to post that into the chat, as well as I'll put the flyer up. Tejano passports. There we go. So how it works, if you don't already know, is you join us here each week at Tohono Virtual Events, and we'll give you a code towards the end of the session that you get. You gather points to get your own free medallion that you can wear at graduation. And as you can see, it's a pretty cool looking medallion, as you can see on those posters. Now, if you're already participating, the code's in the chat. If not, it's not too late to join. We have Tohono virtual events for the entire semester that will have these codes so that you can participate and build up points. And so we would like to invite you to participate. It'll be valid until midnight tonight. And if you want more information, you can sign, or the steps to sign up. You go to Services and Tohono Passport. You can also email Dr. Kiddos, who's her email address is on the flyer. But thank you. I would like to thank everyone for coming today, as well as I'd like to invite you to this afternoon's session as well. So this afternoon, in this same link, we're going to be reviewing different methods of factoring with Math Happy Hour. And then next week, we'd also like to invite you to, on February 11th, which is next Friday at 1 p.m., we're going to have Epcc Culinary Arts. We'll be making a seared petite sirloin basted with garlic and thyme-infused butter, marinated and grilled portobello mushrooms, lobster tail, herbed roast fingerlings, and sautéed green beans. So bring your appetite as well, it sounds like. Also, for happy, thank you, Mr. Silva. I was thinking the same. I was like, oh man, lunch. Anyway, so for Happy Math Hour at 3 o'clock in the same room, especially for those of you that are in Math 1314 and 1324, or maybe you're in the class before and you want to know what you're going to be getting into for the next semester, come and check it out. You can talk to our EPCC math instructors that host it each and every week, and we'll be going over the Exam 1 review session. Again, thank you all for coming today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.